Still in jail, still waiting. And October? Everyone's whispering like it's some kind of turning point for Sean Diddy Combs. But here's the reality. This bail hearing isn't the game changer his team wants it to be. Why? Because the same three factors keep crushing his chances. And at 3 minutes and 30 seconds in, I'll show you the exact line judges keep citing. The one that makes freedom in October feel like a fantasy. All right, let's set the stage. Diddy has been locked up at MDC Brooklyn since his arrest earlier this year on racketeering and trafficking charges. His lawyers have been hammering the bail issue again and again, trying to convince judges that he's not a flight risk, not a danger, and should be out while waiting for trial. But here's the thing. Judges keep swatting those arguments down like flies. Every filing, every plea, every "he promises to behave" letter has been shot down. And in October, he's trying again. So, let's break it down. Legal tea first, drama second. Because when you zoom out, the courtroom strategy isn't just failing, it's backfiring. So why is everyone suddenly circling October on the calendar like it's a Hollywood premiere date? Because that's when Sean Diddy Combs is back in court, trying once again to convince a federal judge to let him walk free while he waits for trial. Now here's the thing. Bail hearings aren't usually headline news. For most defendants, they're quick, procedural, sometimes over before lunch. But when the defendant is one of the most powerful figures in music history, a man whose empire stretched from bad boy records to billion-dollar liquor deals, every bail hearing feels like an episode of Law and Order, Celebrity Edition. And Diddy's team has been pushing this October hearing like it's his big break. They've hinted at new arguments, fresh evidence, maybe even medical claims. They want you to believe this is the moment the judge says, "All right, Mr. Combs, you've waited long enough. You can go home." But let's slow down and remember how federal bail law actually works. This isn't a sympathy contest. Judges don't care about celebrity status, sold-out shows, or nostalgic 90s hits. They care about three questions. Will this guy run if I let him out? Is he a danger to the community if I release him? Can any combination of conditions, money, house arrest, ankle monitors, even surrendering passports, realistically manage the risks? That's it. That's the whole test. And it's a brutal one when the defendant is wealthy, famous, and facing charges that could mean decades behind bars. Here's where the legal tea gets hot. In federal cases, especially racketeering and trafficking cases, the default setting is detention. The Bail Reform Act of 1984 flipped the script from innocent until proven guilty, let them go, to if the charges are serious enough, we presume you stay locked up unless you can prove otherwise. That means Diddy isn't walking into court in October as a man asking for a favor. He's walking in under what's called a presumption of detention. Translation, the starting point is no bail. His lawyers have to climb uphill to prove he deserves release. And historically, that hill is Mount Everest. Think of R. Kelly, denied bail multiple times because prosecutors argued he could intimidate witnesses. Think of Sam Bankman-Fried, the crypto king who tried to argue house arrest at his parents' mansion, only to be tossed back into custody when he couldn't follow restrictions. These are the ghosts haunting Diddy's October hearing. Judges don't like taking chances with wealthy, high-profile defendants who can bend rules. So yes, October matters because it's his next shot. But the odds? Let's just say this isn't a slam dunk. It's more like shooting half court with the lights off and the judge playing defense. And that's before we even get to the first big strike against him. Flight risk. The cash, the jets, the passports. Prosecutors have receipts, and they're ready to throw them in the judge's face all over again. Here's where things really start to sting. If you want bail in federal court, you have to convince the judge you're not a flight risk. That means no running, no hiding, no sneaking off to some private island where extradition treaties are just suggestions. And for Sean Diddy Combs, that argument is basically dead on arrival. Why? Let's start with the obvious. He's rich. Not nice house in the suburbs, rich. We're talking private jets, offshore bank accounts, properties in multiple states, and connections around the globe. Prosecutors point to that and say, if anyone has the resources to vanish, it's this guy. And they're not wrong. In the bail world, money equals mobility. The richer you are, the easier it is to disappear. But wealth is only half the equation. The other half is motive. And Diddy has it in spades. He's not facing a slap on the wrist. He's facing federal racketeering and trafficking charges, the kind of charges that come with sentences measured in decades, not months. If convicted, he could spend the rest of his life behind bars. So, put yourself in a judge's shoes. Here's a man with limitless cash, worldwide connections, and a mountain of legal risk. That's not just a red flag. That's a neon billboard flashing flight risk. And prosecutors aren't just talking in hypotheticals. They've already dropped receipts. During the raids on his properties, prosecutors pointed to reports of cash stashes and multiple passports seized during raids. Translation: go bags. The kind of setup you keep if you need to leave the country in a hurry. Now, his legal team pushes back. They argue, come on, he's Diddy. He can't just vanish. He's too famous. Where would he go without being recognized? Cute spin. But judges don't see fame as a leash. In fact, they often see it as a shield. If anything, notoriety can make fleeing easier. Remember Roman Polanski? The man's been living abroad for decades, untouchable in certain countries. Wealth plus fame doesn't make you safer in the eyes of the court. It makes you scarier. And here's another dagger. The federal system doesn't care if you promise to wear an ankle monitor. Judges know GPS bracelets can be cut off in minutes. They don't care if you pledge a giant bond either. $10 million might sound huge to us, but to Diddy, that's just another weekend in Ibiza. The law even has a phrase for this. They say defendants like him have means and motive. And when those two words show up in a bail ruling, it's basically legal code for this guy isn't going anywhere but back to his cell. And remember that exact line I teased earlier? Yeah, this is where it first showed up. In a previous denial, the judge flat out said, the defendant's resources, combined with the potential sentence, make him an extraordinary flight risk. Once that's in the record, October isn't starting from zero. It's starting from guilty until proven trustworthy. So when Diddy's lawyers stand up in October and argue, he won't run, he'll stay put, he'll play by the rules, the judge will be looking down at that line and thinking, we've heard this all before, and if you think flight risk alone is bad, wait until you hear the next factor. Because judges can sometimes stomach the idea of wealth making someone risky. But what they never gamble on? A defendant who's dangerous to the community. And prosecutors have turned that word, danger, into their sharpest weapon against Diddy. If flight risk makes judges nervous, danger to the community makes them downright unshakable. Because here's the secret of bail hearings. Judges will sometimes take a gamble on a rich defendant not running. But they almost never gamble on someone they think could harm, intimidate, or silence people on the outside. And for Diddy, that's exactly where prosecutors sink their teeth. They're not saying he's going to pull a gun on a random stranger if released. This isn't about street-level violence. They've reframed the word danger into something far scarier. Power. Think about it. The allegations against him aren't just about private misbehavior. They're about using money, connections, and influence to control people. Accusers describe patterns of intimidation. Associates claim there were retaliation tactics. Prosecutors argue that if he walks out those prison doors, even with ankle monitors and restrictions, he has the resources to reach anyone, anywhere. And that's not paranoia, that's precedent. Remember R. Kelly's bail hearings? Same story. Judges were told he could pressure witnesses, intimidate victims, and keep his machine running even from house arrest. Bail denied. Or think of Bernie Madoff. His lawyers begged for release while he waited for trial. Prosecutors argued his financial network made him a threat. Bail denied. It's the same playbook here. When judges hear intimidation and ongoing influence, they stop listening to ankle monitor promises. Now, Diddy's lawyers push the usual counter-arguments. They say, fine, lock him down with strict conditions. He'll stay in his mansion, he'll surrender his phones, he'll avoid all contact with witnesses. But here's the problem. Judges have heard it before, and they know how porous those promises are. Phones can be borrowed, messages can be passed. Influence doesn't vanish just because a GPS bracelet is blinking on your ankle. And in one prior hearing, the judge cut right through the spin. The ruling noted, the danger here is not speculative. It is substantiated by credible allegations and evidence of ongoing intimidation. That line? It's devastating. Because once a judge says the danger is substantiated, it's no longer a gray area. It's on the record, and October's judge isn't going to erase that with a snap of the fingers. Let's add one more layer. Federal bail law specifically allows detention if a defendant poses a serious risk of obstructing justice. That's legal code for If you might threaten witnesses or tamper with evidence, you stay in. And prosecutors have essentially branded Diddy with that label. So when we talk about danger, it's not just hypothetical, it's legal ammunition. And if you thought flight risk was a steep climb, danger to the community is like walking into court with a parachute and asking the judge to believe you'll never jump. Which brings us to the final nail in the coffin. Even if Diddy somehow convinced a judge he's not running and somehow downplayed the intimidation narrative, there's still one hurdle he can't clear. And that's the simple fact that no set of bail conditions can fix these problems. Here's where the legal rubber meets the road. Even if Diddy's lawyers somehow convinced a judge he's not going to flee, even if they downplayed the danger narrative, there's still a third test. Judges have to ask, is there any combination of conditions that could reasonably manage the risks? And in Diddy's case, the answer keeps coming back the same. Absolutely not. Let's walk through the toolkit. Judges have a menu of conditions they can slap on high-risk defendants. Cash bonds, you put up millions, and if you run, you lose it. House arrest, stay inside, guards outside, 24/7 surveillance. Ankle monitors, GPS trackers to ping your location, surrender of passports, no quick flights to Paris or Dubai, restricted communications, no phones, no email, no oops, I accidentally called a witness. Sounds strict, right? But here's the problem. None of these actually neutralize the risks prosecutors are screaming about. Take cash bonds. Sure, $10 million would bankrupt most people. But for Diddy, that's a Ciroc marketing budget. Losing it doesn't sting enough to outweigh the motive of avoiding decades in prison. Judges know that. House arrest? Same issue. House arrest works for someone whose house is a one-bedroom apartment with nosy neighbors. But for a man with sprawling mansions and staff, it's not confinement. It's luxury lockdown. And prosecutors argue it would give him even more privacy to move money, call favors, or pressure witnesses. Ankle monitors? Cute, but laughable. Judges have said in past rulings that GPS doesn't stop influence. It just tells you where someone is while they're breaking the rules. Sam Bankman-Fried had an ankle monitor and still found ways to contact witnesses. Judges hate repeat headaches. And passports? Sure, he can hand those over. But prosecutors point out he doesn't need a passport if he has offshore money, private jets, and powerful friends. International flight risk isn't about paperwork, it's about resources. That's why prosecutors hammered the phrase, no set of conditions can reasonably assure the safety of the community or the defendant's appearance at trial. That's the legal kiss of death. Because once a judge drops that line into a ruling, it echoes into every future bail hearing. And it's not just Diddy. Judges have used the same phrase to keep R. Kelly in jail, to keep Bernie Madoff in jail, to keep mob bosses in jail. It's like a stamp that says, don't bother asking again. So when October rolls around, even if Diddy's lawyers come armed with a brand new list of promises, private security, daily check-ins, maybe even offering his mom as a court-appointed chaperone, the judge is going to look back at that line and think, we've already answered this. In federal court, no conditions means game over. It's not a debate, it's a conclusion. And that's why October isn't a fresh start. It's deja vu with the same ending. But here's the twist. If his lawyers know the odds are this bad, why keep pushing? Why stage another round when the judge already has the words no conditions underlined in the last order? The answer isn't about law at all. It's about PR. So if the odds of bail are basically zero, why keep pushing? Why circle October like it's his shot at freedom? Here's the play. This isn't just a legal battle, it's a PR campaign. Every motion Diddy's lawyers file does two things. First, it gives them a shot, however slim, at testing the waters with the judge. But more importantly, it generates headlines. Diddy pushes again for release. Lawyers argue he's being treated unfairly. Those aren't just court filings, they're press releases dressed up in legal language. This is classic high-profile defense strategy. When you can't win in the courtroom right away, you fight in the court of public opinion. You keep your client in the spotlight. You remind fans and potential jurors that there's another side to the story, and you feed narratives that make prosecutors look heavy-handed. And don't underestimate the psychology. Judges say they're immune to PR, but they read the papers too. They see the trending hashtags. They know public opinion is boiling. Sometimes bail motions are less about winning and more about planting seeds of doubt. Is he really too dangerous? Are prosecutors overreaching? The irony, of course, is that every denial makes the opposite headline louder. Still in jail. And in Diddy's case, that repetition is brutal. The mogul image, the kingpin lifestyle, all overshadowed by 3 words. Still in jail. So, yes, October is technically about bail, but in reality, it's about spin. His lawyers aren't just filing motions. They're staging theater for an audience far bigger than the one in the courtroom. And when that denial comes down again, because it will, the spotlight swings right back to the crumbling empire, which is where this story really gets dark. So let's say October comes and goes. And like every other time, the judge stamps denied. What then? First, the obvious. Diddy stays exactly where he is right now. MDC Brooklyn. And if you don't know what MDC is like, let's just say this. It's not a penthouse with champagne on ice. This is one of the most notoriously grim federal lockups in the country. We're talking overcrowded cells, minimal recreation, constant lockdowns, lights that don't always work, heating that doesn't always work, food that makes airline meals look gourmet. Inmates have described MDC as suffocating, chaotic, and miserable, and that's for regular folks. Imagine going from luxury yachts to a 6x8 cell, where your roommate might be a guy waiting on a gun charge. That's the daily reality if bail stays denied. And every day he's in there, the contrast between his mogul image and his jail reality grows sharper. That's not just punishment, that's PR poison. Now let's zoom out. Denied bail doesn't just hurt his comfort, it hurts his defense strategy. Why? Because it's a nightmare to build a case from inside a detention center. Normally, a celebrity defendant could sit with their lawyers in a private office, go through documents, plan out strategies. In MDC, you get short meetings in glass rooms, under guard, with time limits. Imagine trying to fight a federal indictment with one hand tied behind your back. That's what it feels like when bail is denied. And then there's the empire. Diddy's brand was built on always being present. The party starter, the deal closer, the man in the room. Locked up, he can't run businesses, he can't close deals, he can't flex his mogul status. Sponsors distance themselves, artists step away, money dries up. The longer he sits, the more his empire turns to dust. Here's another layer, the psychological warfare. Prosecutors love when bail is denied. Why? Because it piles on pressure. Every extra month in jail makes a defendant more likely to break, to cut a deal, to consider a plea. MDC isn't just a holding cell, it's leverage. And the government knows it. That's why October isn't just a hearing, it's a ticking clock. Every denial chips away at Diddy's leverage, his image, and his empire. So if bail stays denied, the story becomes less about whether he can win in court and more about how long he can survive behind bars while his empire collapses outside. And that sets us up for the final act. Because there's one line judges keep repeating in these rulings. A line that explains exactly why this October hearing is almost certainly doomed before it begins. All right, here's the nail in the coffin. In one of the earlier bail rulings, the judge dropped a line that's basically haunted every single motion since. It reads, "No set of conditions can reasonably assure the safety of the community or the defendant's appearance at trial." That's it. That's the phrase. And in federal court, once that sentence is in the record, it echoes like gospel. Because here's the deal. Every future bail hearing has to climb over that line. It's not just one judge's opinion anymore. It's precedent in this case. Unless something drastic changes, like charges being dropped or prosecutors flipping their stance, that sentence is the immovable wall his lawyers keep slamming into. And that's why October isn't really a fresh shot at freedom. It's déjà vu. The same motion, the same arguments, the same wall of words, no conditions, no bail. So the next time you see a headline hyping this hearing like it's Diddy's big chance, remember that line, because the judge already wrote the ending months ago. So there it is. October looks big, but the reality is bleak. 3 factors: flight risk, danger, and no workable conditions. Keep shutting Diddy's bail hopes down. But here's what I want to know. If you were the judge, would you give Diddy bail? Yes or no? Drop your verdict. Drop your take in the comments. Because this debate isn't just legal, it's cultural. And if you love your gossip with a side of subpoenas, hit that subscribe button. Because October may not free Diddy, but it's definitely going to serve us more courtroom drama.